After a year and a half of the political left, their media allies, and the liberal social media platforms denying, suppressing, and appearing to give cover to the president's son and his questionable business dealings, the media is finally taking notice. But they're still stopping short of asking the key question. What did the president know, and when did he know it? This is Outnumbered. Hello, everyone. I'm Kayleigh McEnany, here with my co-host Harris Faulkner and Emily Campagno. Also joining us, Jackie DeAngelis and Joey Jones. You may remember President Biden fiercely defending Hunter beginning on the campaign trail.
Every single solitary, serious investigator, including your network and others, have looked at this, have said there's absolutely zero basis to the accusation that I acted any way inappropriately or that my son did.
So you think that everything that happened was kosher?
You know there's not one single bit of evidence, not one little tiny bit, to suggest anything done was wrong. Nothing was unethical. I am not concerned about any accusations been made against him. It's used to get to me. I think it's kind of foul play, but look, it is what it is, and he's a grown man. He is the smartest man I know. I mean, in pure intellectual capacity.
I love how he squinted the eye. Not one little bit, he swears. Well, apparently that's all the media needed to hear. But now there are reports that a witness who testified before the Hunter Biden grand jury was asked to identify, quote, the big guy, referenced in the first son's planned deal with a Chinese energy company. And this is raising concerns that the president may have just been pulled into the federal probe. And still, as Rich Lowry points out, the media's lack of interest in the president's knowledge or involvement in this lucrative part of the family business is palpable. If President Donald Trump were caught up in similar circumstances, he'd be hounded at every press conference and during every walk to Marine One with the question of what he knew and when he knew it. That is undoubtedly true. The media hounded President Donald J. Trump. I remember. Emily, this is significant. Basically, there's this secret panel that was convened. You had a witness who testified that he knows who the big guy is. He was asked who the big guy is. We know who the big guy is, or at least we can surmise. National Review, Rich Lowry put it this way. A notorious email says that the big guy, identified by Bob Alinsky as Joe Biden, that was the business partner of Hunter, was going to get a 10% cut of the deal. In a text, this is the key part, Hunter's associate, James Gillier, reminded Bob Alinsky, don't mention Joe being involved. It's only when you are face to face. How significant now that a witness has been asked about this?
I think all this does is underscore the fact that the rest of the American people have had this question all along. Yes, who is the big guy? Now we have proof that the federal government is very interested in who that big guy is. I think it's quite obvious that when you are investigating crimes of this nature, investigations of this nature, we have allegations of improper lobbying, tax evasion, improper financial receipt, and influence peddling, a conflict of interest. At a minimum, it matters who the associates are. It matters with whom you are connecting the dots. And so the notion that the president is not somehow at least identified as part of this molecule, when we know for certain his son obviously is and his brother is laughable. It is ludicrous to think that the president would not in some way be identified as part of this. This doesn't mean that he's guilty of anything. It means that he needs to be referenced. And so the fact that the media has ignored this, the fact that the Democrat Party refuses to address this, is quite unconscionable in my opinion. And it also begs the question that is, as the Justice Department continues its investigation, which all signs lead to potentially an indictment coming quite soon, it begs the question whether there's a conflict of interest between them and exactly who they're investigating, because mark my words, President Biden will be named in those documents.
That's fascinating. Harris?
You know what's interesting, and you taught us this yesterday, and you're reminding us now, Emily, that it isn't always the person that they're looking at who gets the shine from the grand jury. It's all those other people that they're going to find out about, and maybe some pressure applied there. So the current chief of staff of the White House is Ron Klain. And I thought this was an interesting bit of reporting. In September 2012, Ron Klain reached out to Hunter Biden for cash, $20,000. And Klain had left his post then as chief of staff for Vice President Biden at the time. But he was working as the foundation's chairman. And he, in an email, said that he needed to tackle a piece of unpleasant business and needed Hunter's help. Cash. He said, but we have to keep this low, low key. because we want to prevent bad PR. Now, just as Emily pointed out, we don't know all of the variations of truth and facts and things that could come out behind the scenes in that story. But what we do know is that on the surface, somebody had some access to something and somebody who had some cash. Those two things were coming together. And so they get a look at now because it's part of the evidence. This is some of the stuff that's kind of being unearthed, if you will. I wonder what else is out there.
It's a great point, and we have that email. Let's pop it up. I mean, this is significant reporting by Fox News Digital, this email from the chief of staff. Now, we don't know what Ron Klain knew. He obviously believed that Hunter Biden had money, had resources to give to this fund. We don't know if Ron Klain knew the extent of the foreign business dealings. Nevertheless, here he wants to tackle a piece of unpleasant business, as Harris said, keep this low-key, bad PR. But my question is there a chance here? It was apparently Hunter Biden's law firm that he was getting the money from, but we don't know if they ever gave the money. We don't know if Hunter Biden got it from a different source. But Joey, could money from China or Ukraine or these various countries that Ron Klain was getting, or excuse me, that Hunter Biden was getting money from, gone to Ron Klain to fund the VP's residence? There is a chance for sure.
Oh, absolutely, there's a chance. And go back to the big guy statement. Really what it comes down to is, can they trace what would I think be 30%, which would be Hunter's 20 plus the big guy's 10%. Can they trace 30% in monetary value of a deal into a bank account for Hunter, and then can they take and surmise that 1/3 of that went to fund something for Joe Biden? I mean, you follow the money, you don't have to prove who the big guy is, the money does it for you.
Follow the money.
On this Ron Klain email, I kind of take a step back and see it a little bit differently. If you read the whole context of the email, I would believe that, you know, Joe Biden crashed a golf cart at the vice president's residence, and they didn't want people to find out about it. It doesn't look like, on face value, it's as much that they were soliciting money for nefarious reasons as much as the bad PR is they hadn't raised any money since since the previous vice president left, and he's in charge of this organization that's supposed to raise money. So it seems to me like Ron Klain was in a pickle for the job he was supposed to be doing, and he was reaching out to his inner circle to get 20 grand for whatever had happened.
But why was Hunter Biden his inner circle to tap cash? Yes. I think that's the question here.
I mean, you go to the people that are going to talk the least, and you talk about the difference between unethical and illegal. There's not much about Hunter Biden that isn't unethical. That doesn't mean it's illegal. And it looks to me like Ron Klain went to where he could get the money the quickest and would talk the least. Having worked in nonprofit world, everything that isn't good PR is bad PR. So I don't know that that's the smoking gun, but going back to the big guy stuff and the fact that this laptop is now evidence and it's being looked into, we're going to find out if Joe Biden was in any way taking money that was funneled to him in some way or the other from foreign entities, and that's a big deal.
Yeah, speaking of the big guy, let's flash back to the then candidate for the Democratic Party. Of course, it was Joe Biden back in 2019. Here's what he said then about his son.
Have you ever spoken to your son about his overseas business dealings?
I've never spoken to my son about his overseas business dealings.
Jackie, he told Peter Doocy he'd never spoken to him, except here we go. Here's the New Yorker a few months later. Here's what we learned a few months prior, I should say. In December 2015, as Joe Biden prepared to return to Ukraine, his aides braced for renewed scrutiny of Hunter's relationship with Burisma. Amos Hochstein, the Obama administration's special envoy for energy policy, raised the matter with Biden, but did not go so far as to recommend that Hunter leave the board. As Hunter recalled, this is the important part, his father discussed Burisma with him just once. Dad said, "I hope you know what you are doing." And I said, "I do." Plus, we have this beauty of a picture with President Biden and Devin Archer, Hunter Biden's business associate. But he never, Jackie, never, ever, ever discussed this with Hunter.
Yeah, it just amazes me how the runway is there, not only by the media, but to a certain extent, some of the American public that allows Joe Biden to lie like that. When you think about the media's coverage of this, when you think about the New York Post story that exposed it right before the election, there are members of the American public who do want to know exactly what happened here, what Joe Biden's involvement was. And also, yes, there is a difference between something necessarily being illegal or being unethical, but when you're going to the polls and making a decision on who you want to be the leader of the free world, their ethics matter. They certainly matter to people when it came to President Trump. And so I sit back and I marvel at how, you know, the shoe is so different. The situation is so different when the shoe is on the other foot. I mean, it's appalling.
And their relationships matter, because look at where we are with China right now. hoping that they don't help Russia continue to kill people in Ukraine by any means possible, their military, their money, whatever Putin's asking China for. That's where we are right now. So we want to know what the relationships between the president and his son were, with particularly China, perhaps others.
American voters deserve to know. That's the bottom line.
Hi, everyone. I'm Brian Kilmeade. I want you to do me a favor. I want you to click to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page. This is the only way that I know for sure that you're not going to miss any great commentary, any great news bites, any great interviews coming your way on Fox. You can get it all here on YouTube. So subscribe right now.